There is 100% no doubt that Ninja is one of the best players in the game currently in Fortnite, and he's definitely going to be keeping that going for a long time. But with that being said, what can you guys learn from him that isn't so obvious on the surface? What are some secret things that he does that you might not be doing that can improve your game? Well, that is exactly what we are going to cover in today's video. We are going to be going over how he looks at different situations, how he decides to handle different fights, little tricks he uses, and more. Just a ton of stuff to help you guys get better by learning from one of the top pros in the game. So yeah guys, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to hit that like button down below. Always helps me out a ton, and I really do appreciate it so much. On top of that, I am curious guys, comment your favorite pro player down below in the comments. Is it Ninja? Is it a different player? Maybe Tfue, Myth? There's a ton of good pros, especially in Summer Skirmish, that are showing up. So I would love to hear what you guys have to say about that. But without further ado, here we have a ton of these to go through. So let's just jump on into it here with the first tip. And also actually before we get into it, I do want to clarify that I tried to go for more tips that you probably haven't noticed. Obviously he plays a ton. Obviously he has very good gun skill and building skills, but that's not what I wanted to go through. I wanted to go through some of the more secretive things that he does that you might not have ever thought about. So like the first one here is that he is always keeping track of the bus's path. The vast majority of players just kind of, you know, pick a spot to go and then just jump for it and never think about the bus until the next game. However, on Ninja's side, he's actually always keeping track of where exactly the bus starts, where it's going, so that he knows where the majority of players are going to land and how that will affect him later on in the game, like where people will be coming from. On top of that, it also helps him know where to drop, which is a little bit more obvious. Obviously, you guys probably do that as well. If where you want to drop is farther along the bus path, obviously people are going to be dropping towards the beginning usually. But again, Ninja keeps that in mind, so he knows exactly where most people are on the map, and he uses that to his advantage in the later circles to know where to sort of set up or where to rush in on people. It's a very simple thing to start keeping track of, but once you start doing it, it can be super helpful, especially with your positioning, so that you never have people like sneak up behind you. But after that, however, let's keep it going here with another one that I just kind of like thought about recently. It's something that I never really noticed when watching Ninja's streams, and actually I noticed it during the Summer Skirmish that was just going on this weekend. That was a ton of fun. I really did love watching it. But something that Nick-A30 actually pointed out, he was one of the people commentating at the time, but when they were watching Ninja, he pointed out that Ninja often doesn't reload a ton during gunfights. Or at least maybe a better way of saying that is he's very good at determining when to reload and when to continuously fire, switch to another weapon and keep firing, and then save the reloading for when he absolutely has to. A lot of times the majority of players just sort of like pull out their AR, fire at somebody, and then when they run out of ammo in the AR, they immediately go to reload, and that sort of like switches the momentum to the other person's side where they can start firing back at them. However, with Ninja, especially when he gets in close with people, he's using his shotgun, his SMGs, his ARs, sometimes even his sniper rifle to continuously keep that person building and just get in as much damage as possible, and then reloading when he does absolutely have to and he is in cover. Now of course, obviously this isn't always the case. He will reload his AR if he absolutely has to, but that's generally at like range and stuff. But yeah, definitely watch for that, especially when he's rushing in. It's cool to see. Now as for the next one here that sort of builds off the previous one and is another one that I noticed during the Summer Skirmish. If you guys haven't watched Summer Skirmish, it's a really cool way to like learn about stuff. But Nick-A30 makes a lot of good points, and I can't remember if it was exactly Ninja doing this at the time, but I do know for sure that Ninja does do this a ton. But when he is rushing somebody, especially in like solo squads, solo duos, or not like solo squads, when he's playing in squads, one of the things he does and a lot of other pro players do is that they build up, shoot, then build up a little higher, then shoot, then keep building up a little higher, and then keep shooting. They don't just continuously build up until they get to like 4 stories up. They do it gradually and switch off between putting fire down on the enemies, and then they'll build up after that and then keep repeating the process as much as they need to. Now if that doesn't make a ton of sense, hopefully these examples will show you a little bit about it, but this itself is very helpful for a variety of reasons. But one of the main ones is that it keeps your opponent from firing too much at your structure. Like if you're just trying to build your entire like 3-story, 4-story ramp at once, it gives your opponent a ton of time to just shoot out a piece of it and you'll come falling down. However, if you build like 2 stories starting out, then return fire to the opponent, then build another story, then return fire, it keeps them from knocking your structure down. And also along with that, it gives your structure time to gain health and get to the max health, again making it even harder to shoot down. Now Ninja usually does this with the ramp, floor, wall, and I know that's a little bit hard to do on consoles, but even if you can just do ramp, wall, it helps out a ton to keep your structures from being immediately melted by your opponent, and overall it is very helpful. But moving on to the next one here, this one is kind kind of unique, and it is kind of a tip, kind of just some advice. But when you watch Ninja, a lot of the time you're thinking, oh man, I want to be like that. I want to be able to destroy just like every lobby I go into. And sometimes you go into game and you just have off days and can't seem to even get one win. But something to keep in mind is that even Ninja has off days. You can see in some of his stats and just watching him, sometimes he's just having an off day, as everybody has once in a while. He's got tons of streaks of just not being able to win a game, just things aren't going his way. And obviously these might be a little bit less since he is a very good player. But the thing is, he still has them. He still stays confident during them to get over those ruts and continue to do well. But if you guys are comparing yourself to that, it's okay to have a bunch of off days. Trust me, I know how frustrating that can be, but it is a good reminder to know that even the pros go through that, and maybe that can help you gain a little bit of confidence to then get out of those ruts. But then moving back into it with like a tip that has to do with in-game and stuff like that, and this kind of builds off of the first tip we actually went over, which was again the keeping track of the bus routes. But basically Ninja is always keeping track and trying to predict different teams' rotations. If you watched one of his streams recently, he talked a lot about how he learned like rotations of players in game from being a PUBG player back in the day, back when he was like one of the top players in that, going to tournaments, competing, winning tournaments even. He did learn to predict enemies' movements very well, and that translated to Fortnite. Now, how exactly do you predict rotations and enemies moving? Well, once more, it kind of builds off of the battle bus, knowing where most people are going to be by judging the start of the battle bus, and then when the circle shows up, taking note of where the big named locations are. Like if the edge of the circle is just on Retail Row, you can expect a lot of people to come from there. Along with that, if the circle is like coming from Tilted, you can expect a ton of people to be rotating out of Tilted, coming up that hill near Loot Lake and stuff like that. So basically try and keep in mind where those popular locations are located alongside the circle, and that's how you can predict where people are, and keep that in mind when you're building your forts or trying to find people to attack. But moving on here to an interesting trick that actually has to do with building, and is one of my favorite tricks that I learned recently, especially with how they've been nerfing a ton of tactics to look out of your 1x1s and stuff, like the ghost peeking fixes way back when they redid how buildings actually build. But there is still a very accurate way to sort of like see through your structures so that you can look for enemies without risking getting sniped or shot at all. Now, most pros tend to use this a bunch, but basically how it works is you build your 1x1. All you have to do is edit in a window, and that'll rebuild the wall a little bit and give you time to look through it and scout out for enemies. And then once it's built, you simply reset it and it rebuilds the wall again, giving you more time to look through the wall. Now, this also works differently with different materials. Like metal does last longer, but it's a little awkward like where the pieces sort of line up. Wood works really well, but it doesn't last that long, and then brick is sort of the middle ground with this. But by far, it's one of the best ways to peek with zero risk of getting sniped, which is always one of the worst things. Seriously, it's annoying. But yeah, keeping it going here with the next tip on the list. This is that Ninja really knows when to build instead of going for those one-on-one fights. Now, specifically what I mean by that is when you get in those fights where you basically don't have cover in between you two and you're kind of just betting on who has more health. A lot of the time Ninja doesn't get involved with these, but instead he gets a few shots off, then builds, and then tries to reposition and get a few more shots off if the opponent is firing back. Again, going back to that one tip where he switches weapons and continues to keep firing on people, he mainly does that if the person has a bunch of damage on them or is building. But when he's shooting at somebody and somebody starts to shoot back and gets shots on him, he immediately builds to stop that damage, especially when he is low on health, which is something that a lot of pros do, but especially Ninja, and it's something to definitely keep in mind. Don't try and like risk it and be like, oh, I'll probably have more health, because even if you do, you may be losing health that you could save just by building and repositioning a little bit and then going from there. So yeah, very situational, but with practice it can be very helpful. But as for the next one after that, this mainly has to do with squads, and especially solo squads. He actually made a specific comment about this, giving people tips on what they can do when they're going up against a squad by themselves. But the way that he sort of handles it is by focusing on one person at a time and making sure to eliminate them. It doesn't do you any help by doing damage to one person, not eliminating them or knocking them down, I mean, and then moving on to the next one, doing a little bit of damage, then to the next person a little bit of damage, because if you don't knock them down, you've still got 4 people firing back at you and making it a lot tougher to do. Now, on top of this, he also makes it very clear that it is by far 100% better to focus on the person that is trying to like knock down your structures and stuff. There's always that one person that's just firing so much at you, whether it be rocket launchers or just an AR or SMG or a minigun. I mean, come on, the minigun. I have nightmares of that thing, but he tends to try and pick that person off because then he doesn't have to worry about his structures being damaged as much. On top of that, once you knock that person, it causes sort of a domino effect where they're going to try and revive that person, so maybe you have to focus on two, or you can try and find that person that's reviving, knock them down when they're distracted, and then move on to the next people, whether it be a 1-on-2 or a 1-on-1, and then it just gets a lot easier from there. And also that sort of helps you determine who to go after first, because like when you're first starting to try and do those solo duos, solo squads, it can be hard to know who to focus on. It gets very hectic very fast with 4 people coming up on you. Sometimes you don't know who to shoot, sometimes you don't know what to go and build. So yeah, by creating a sort of priority list of putting that RPG minigun person at the top lets you know who to eliminate first, then you can go on and sort of determine who's the next most important threat and continue down the line from there. And again guys, with practice you're going to learn that if you really want to get into solo squads and stuff, or just even help your team out with this doesn't even have to be in solo squads, I guess. If you're going up against another squad, these tips will definitely help you out with that as well. You can also even communicate with your teammates and tell them who to focus on. And honestly guys, a lot of squads don't do that. They don't have good communication and kind of just split up and fight whoever they see. So if you're able to do that, you have a vast advantage over the majority of players you run into in squads. But yeah guys, that is going to be it for today's video. I hope you found it helpful, and if you did, be sure to subscribe for more videos like this coming up in the near future. Along with that, you can check out some of my previous videos, such as on the left, going through a bunch of secret changes in the recent update, and then on the right, another fun video I'm sure you guys will enjoy. But other than that guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.